as Kranis, the ministry has been created actually as ICT ministry in 2008 only. So before that there was a number of things, broadcasting and a lot of things. So since then we have identified critical areas in terms of our focus for policy development. And of course I think the bulk of our efforts went into getting the regulator up and running, because that is critical as an ombudsman, so to speak, for the industry. You can have the policies, you can have the laws in place, but if you don't have the institutions behind it, we're talking about previously, I think a lot of the presentations was referring to the fact that it's good to have these policies, to have the laws, but we must have a mechanism or another means to implement it. So if it is on the book, that's fine, it's there, but the implementation is where I think the challenge lies. So as far as that is concerned, I think we have identified critical areas. Of course, the issue of electronic transactions, because the industry have gone ahead. I mean, we have internet banking, we have e-tax and so on and so forth. So that is an area which is critical and that we have identified to get the legal framework in place. Of course, the policy generally is there, and I'm also glad that my sister this morning from the Ombudsperson's office indicated that in fact, through Article 144 of the Constitution, we have all these laws, all these international instruments as part of our law. So we could take that and basically challenge the government or whoever we want, because by virtue of that provision in the Constitution, we have the international conventions on the right of the child and the right of information and all that. It's part of our law. So there is at least a framework, there is at least, although at constitutional level, but we have to also follow it up with more specific legislations. So as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I could read, the purpose of our conference is that we want actually to make ourselves, or it's a gathering of advocates for access to information in Namibia, for a law for access to information. And the mere fact that we are here, I think, testifies to the fact that we do want that. And that is also what the government is saying. And my minister, in his statement this morning, also said that it is work in progress. And unfortunately, we have to say, give us time, but thank you for reminding us of this critical area. Thank you very much.
To what extent is the private sector sort of, since government now you say has to play catch up to the developments that have taken place, so to what extent are you getting private sector support to roll out your plans? And also, how urgent or what's the level of the political will towards the ministry to enable you guys to be able to sort of shorten the gap between the industry and government? Do you think there's sufficient understanding and a sense of urgency that as a ministry, we actually, as you play catch up, that you really need, this is something that you need to do quite urgently?
Want the long or the short answer? The short one is yes.
The long one?
Okay, the medium one is, I must say that you know, my learned friend has indicated that as long as 99, you know, government has already declared the intention and the will to develop an access to information law. Since 99, and of course since 99, we also have a policy on ICT generally. And if you look at our Vision 2030, I mean, these are now these documents that is on what we call high-level statements or high-level, where we, in terms of Vision 2030, we have a specific focus on ICT, and in fact, it has subsequently been declared as a priority area for government, although you don't hear of it often. So in terms of playing catch-up, that's what I was alluding to earlier, that there is a sense of urgency. We have a minister that is a champion for ICT development and ICT and access issues and the growth, actually the development, growth and usage of ICT. We are putting all our efforts into putting our plans and strategies in place to be able to facilitate to catch up with industry, and to facilitate ICT growth, development, and promotion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just, you want to comment on the bureaucratic dysfunction that that couldn't.
All right. So let me put my ICT and education hat on. I think we should applaud Minister Joel Kapanda for using the public media on the 15th of May this year to announce laudably that all education sector components, everything from pre-primary through secondary and tertiary education, would forevermore get free, uncapped, high-speed internet access at every one of those institutions that are out there trying to educate our children. Now that's something to applaud. Now the question to ask, and where I see the bureaucracy slowing this down, is there's yet to be any firm commitment from the Ministry of Education to actually corroborate that commitment by Joel Kapanda. And I think that's a very important issue that we have at hand here now. In the context of a universal service and access fund component to one of the chapters that is still to be promulgated in the Act. So obviously, with a slight misunderstanding in the way that this thing got to the public media on the 15th of May, I, as a social activist, am delighted to keep reminding you, as a Ministry of ICT, that you made that commitment. And the day that that commitment is realized across 1,700 schools in Namibia, then I can retire and you'll never see me in your face again. Okay, but the reality is that we would hope that the Act and the people that are involved in getting that Act to serve our communities in the very last inches and last centimeters of development out in our rural areas, is the fact that we still have a problem with 43% of our schools not having electricity. No electricity, no communication. So in other words, no access to information. And I think that is part of the parcel of the situation. People say that electricity would cost us an arm and a leg, but when we look at the new rapidly evolving form factor in the form of tablets, which we believe will be the form factor of choice in education across the world, and in particular the developing world, we can see that very conservative energy requirements are at stake here. We're not talking monster energy requirements, and I would like to believe that the Universal Service Fund, as it's been drafted presently, and it's, I think, now in its final draft form, would actually allow for that fund through levy systems and whatever you have available to us to tap into private sector, tap into telecom operators, and tap into, I still hope, Stanley, those people that sell us the Nokias and the computers and the software that is costing this government zillions of dollars every year. So hopefully, through a tax and levy system, we can see very affordable internet being made available to those ministries that are determined, as I understand from the policies that they've put in place, to provide those internet access and access to information solutions from when Techno was launched in September of 2007. So I think it's, 2006. So I would like to see going forward a change in the way that these different line function ministries cooperate to see that final low-cost internet solution being made available to the government systems that would provide that for free to every one of our children and teachers in Namibia. I think that's where I would like to see this go. And it's something that you as media practitioners must continue to remind our Ministry of ICT and, importantly, our Ministry of Education that they themselves are accountable to those children and teachers, and to NamPower and the Reds and all the other people that should also be involved in this table. I've got lots more to say, obviously, but I think 645 schools need your help. And that means media attention on a daily basis, using blogs, wikis, Facebook, whatever, to remind our decision makers that that is far more urgent than some strange monuments in town. Thank you.
Stan is itching to respond, but let me just take comments from Anthony. Let me just take your comment then.
My comment on, well, I mean, first of all, I applaud this forum and the dialogue on access to information, the role of ICTs. Unlike most of you, I'm actually I'm not an advocate. I'm not a civil society advocate. I work for the U.S. government, but as on behalf of the U.S. government, I can say one of the things that we do deem to be incredibly important for the accountability of government is its transparency, and of course that is enshrined at the federal level through the Freedom of Information Act. States have our individual states have their own sort of Freedom of Information Acts as well. One of the things with regards to ICTs that is interesting is that in a recent directive by President Obama to all federal agency heads, one of the things that he identifies is that there is a need for agencies to be affirmative in the disbursement of relevant information to the public in advance of any request for said information. Now, that's not all information, but it's certain categories of information. When Mr. Elliott was talking about his having seen recent sort of a 90% of ministries have improved their websites. One of the things that federal agencies in the United States have done is using website technology and also electronic reading rooms, or a mix of electronic reading rooms and conventional reading rooms, to make certain categories of information available to the public in advance of any kind of potential request. And those things are final opinions or orders that are made in the adjudication of cases, specific agency policy statements, administrative staff manuals. I think that's something you mentioned as well. But one interesting point is also records disclosed in response to a Freedom of Information access request that the agency deems may become the subject of future requests, that information should also be archived online and made available to people. So that's one way in which sort of the web world has allowed agencies to preemptively sort of tackle the information needs of the public. I'll stop there.
Thanks. Let me just then come to Dumisani as well. Gordon spoke about building a knowledge society and how Namibia can build its own profile within a global outlook. How do we go about building a knowledge society using ICTs, for instance?
Thanks, Levi. I think I'll start by saying this is a very important platform for me as someone who works for the Open Society. It's important in a number of ways. We are both an advocacy organization and a grant-making organization, and we have made access to information part of the critical pillars of our work. So, as you have heard from Advocate Shankula this morning, we have been supporting a lot of effort around promoting access to information. But talking about ICTs, I think what I find very interesting is that we are all in agreement that ICTs are a key lever for promoting access to information. But I think what we need to talk a lot more perhaps is the issue of access to those ICTs that enable people to participate. And I think it's quite important in our region, especially when you consider that some countries have reached levels where you find that, South Africa, for instance, you have levels of over 100% penetration of mobile phones. But when you look at the actual happening on the ground, you see that there's quite a huge differential access to these ICTs. And I think it speaks to a number of challenges that we face at governmental level, at regulatory level, where you find that in most cases, the industry is far more advanced, technology is moving a lot faster, and the regulators are left behind, and by extension, ordinary people suffer in the process. So I think when I try to address your question about building a knowledge economy, I think it's important to start addressing those critical issues about access to key technologies that allow people to participate. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Karen, your comment on the legal framework or the laws that exist currently, as you had Gordon speak, what was your immediate reaction to?
Well, I think it fits into some of the trends we've seen. Freedom House, I actually work on our Media Freedom Index, which is an annual publication looking at general media freedom. We also publish a smaller index that looks particularly at internet and digital media freedom, including all types of ICTs, mobile phones. And some of the trends we've noted as part of that index is that although there's been this incredible improvement in access, particularly in Africa, and particularly with mobile phones in Africa, from a low base, we've seen increases in censorship and online surveillance. And on the legal side in particular, we've seen that in many cases the legal framework is not keeping up with the changes, as Dumasani said, in the media environment. So in a lot of countries, they're using laws that apply to traditional print and broadcast media to try and sort of extend those laws to deal with cases that come up in the realm of ICTs. In other countries, what we've seen is that they are developing specific laws to deal with ICTs like cybercrime, other things like that. And in some cases, these laws are actually more strict than the general media laws. So you see in countries such as Indonesia, you have laws where the penalties for sort of online defamation are much stronger than what you see in the offline world. And I think that's something of concern where, in general, in most countries, the level of internet freedom and openness is much more than the traditional media. But in some cases, the laws that are coming in that are meant to deal specifically with issues concerning ICTs are actually more strict than the general laws. And what we see, it sounds like from what Gordon was talking about, the cyber legislation, it's a very broad wording. It can cover a number of different aspects. Namibia is obviously a very open and democratic country, so you'd expect that the law would not be used, to suppress political or social dissent. But in a number of other countries, that is a worry. So I think whenever you see this sort of very broadly worded legislation, as a media freedom advocate, I'm always slightly worried about the potential implications. So I'll stop there for now, and then hopefully answer more questions.
All right, thanks. I'm going to let Stan respond to what he wanted. Then we're going to take questions. I think we actually need a whole conference on its own to tackle this. So just going to get through it as quickly as we can. So Stan, your responses.
You do actually. I think we must commend government on one particular thing. Although we may not have a legislation and act that's called Access to Information, the 2009 Communications Act is a move in that particular direction, and Gordon pointed that out. Our act particularly puts an obligation on us to make public information available. Our act puts an obligation on us to disclose this kind of information that gets submitted to us. We send out emails on applications that come through. We have public registers where people need to come look at people who are applying for licenses and comment on it, for example. Now that's the same kind of principle that you want copied in all other sectors and made more generally applicable so that you people have that direct access. To what Jora said earlier on, we've got one particular challenge, and this is what I want to bring home to everyone around here is, yes, we want to promote the access to the ICTs, and you've got to speak about how affordable is it, can people reach it, and we're working on all of that. Despite that part of the act not having come into place yet, we're doing all the groundwork already. We're working in the background to do that. One of the particular challenges we've identified is that the information and the content, not sufficient of it, is out there. You will have school kids have access to the internet, and they will have their iPads. What are they accessing? Is it the pornography? Is it the Western information about all kinds of things? Is it being on Yahoo and Facebook and Messenger? And is it that the information that we want people to have? The information that they need around health and education, all of that information is not there. So we've identified that as part of the scope of the Universal Service Fund, we would need to extend that mandate to include local content development. That's on the one side, so that when people have access to it, they know what they're looking for. Secondly, you would, maybe that's what the Act will encourage, you would need all the archiving and the documents to be put on the electronic formats. All of that work needs to be done, and those projects need to be started somewhere, so that if someone wants access to company records, and when journalists are doing investigations and they need access to company records to know exactly who are behind those companies who are corrupt, for example, somebody needs to take all that information and actually make it electronically available. All of that currently is not available, and I think that's where we need to start. So we're asking the question, what comes first? You'll have the computers and all people will access it, play games, and that's it. But the rest of the other information and the content, that needs to be seriously addressed.
Thank you. I have lots of questions, and I'm hoping a lot. But maybe before I start, can I just be undemocratic and pose my question first? The issue of how we access the actual ICTs, which Dubisan was alluding to. And I just wanted to touch on what Gordon said about, well, I think there was a brief comment you made on China. For instance, we know that China is making chip ICTs, which are very accessible and have proved actually to be working quite well within Africa. So what would, because when you mentioned China, you were a bit skeptical, if I got you right. So, so could you just respond to that? Okay, I'm going to come to the gentleman here. And who else? That side. Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. My name is Operi Murangi. I am from Kettle Country, Omahega region. I got 3 questions here. Question number 1 is for Professor Moyo and Mr. Jores. My interest is consideration of the use of mother tongue, of the promotion of indigenous knowledge on world map. No, there is any site where we can just only try to tell us what is on the ground, what is on the world map. And question number 2 is going to my friend Stanley, and is the issue of the West Africa cable, the wax. So my interest is there is the ownership. How can an ordinary poor me can have access to the wax cable? There is any room or a window of opportunity? And the third question is to lawyer Gordon. In your presentation, you were talking about the e-governance. So can you provide some highlights, the latest development on e-governance? How is Namibia readiness on rollout of e-governance? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much for the platform. My name is Lucas Beto from the Office of the Auditor General. My question is more really not a question, but more commentary to bring something to the attention of the House and the panel at large. It seems like Mr. Stanley highlighted a very pertinent issue, that the ICT sector is concerned with the absence of local content, local data information online or in the cyberspace arena, right? I'm a little bit disappointed, if I can put it that way, with government at large. These are my personal views, not the views of my employer. Right. I would say I'm a little bit disappointed with the government, with the public, with myself, and civil society at large. We have witnessed the collapse of a very important body in the Namibian economy. I think that was the year 2011. That's the collapse of NEPRU, the Namibian Economic Policy Research Unit. Right. So I would like to link that to the concern of the ICT sector present here today. NEPRU was, if I could say, a very efficient body in producing baseline information and data for planning. I think one of the key stakeholders was government through National Planning Commission. They would produce data for Bank of Namibia, for example, and other relevant stakeholders. The public watched NEPRU collapse in broad daylight, and there was no reactionary comments apart from the media, of course. The media did their part. They reported what has transpired. But nothing happened to save that very important institution to the economy. I just want to find out from the panel, there could be other institutions that don't have legislative mandate or legislative power or instruments that warrants for their existence in society and that warrants for the activities that they do, but they add significant value to society and the economy at large. How can we use this law that we're proposing now? How can we use ATI, ICT, to contribute to the sustainability of all these other bodies that we have in civil society? I hope it's quite clear enough. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. My name is Maina Henry. I think I appreciate some of the discussions that have gone on, but I want to challenge those colleagues who are in government, and more so I think Stanley. Kenya has set a pace in the region on ability to use ICTs. You know that mobile money, M-Pesa, that is hitting the world so hard, was invented in Kenya. And one of the things that is very clear, that you're not going to transit into a knowledge economy if you still do not allow people to use Messenger or Yahoo without limiting it. That if you continue with that fear, all you're doing is that you are putting so many young Namibians on a death row, that their creativity on what they can do with ICT is going to be limited to what Stanley thinks is right. So I would advise that you help in thinking through and unleashing their potential by doing what is right. And what is right within your ministry, using the Communications Act, is to create government data sets of information. Make them available and let young ICT people use them for different reasons. And then again, Kenya in the sub-Saharan Africa put up the first government data set of information, so that what our elder is saying he needs to retire when you help the 243 schools, let him retire because you have put up so much information and he can no longer analyze. And that would help, so that we know we can call on him to help in assessing certain trends. So you can begin to deal with the issue of lack of local content by creating an industry, an emergent industry on ICT, and begin to change those dynamics from that perspective. So all I'm just doing is not from an activist point of view, because I think sometimes you have issues with activists and you never believe that they say anything that works. But we have seen that it has worked in a country like Kenya, where they yielded space following what activists had said. And it's possible that activists are also as patriotic as those who work in government. Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes, Eileen Rake from the Office of Ombudsman. I would just like to remind the House as well as the panel that although formal policies and enactments are necessary